We're going to dive straight in with our main story this week, which concerns Hungary, a country with over 1,000 years of rich history, a proud culture, and absolutely no chance of you finding it on this map. No chance whatsoever. No shade to Hungary, by the way. That is all on you. Hungary's given a lot to the world, from Bela Lugosi's to the Rubik's Cube to, of course, the game Hungry Hippos. Yeah, that second Hungary has an A in it. Always did. Wild, huh? It's also brought us one of the internet's greatest ever memes.
András, a retired electric engineer, was asked to be a model for stock photos 10 years ago. The internet discovered them and decided that his smile hides a deep sorrow. He became Hide the Pain Harold. A flurry of memes followed, and András found that his face was a laughingstock of the internet.
If I wanted to draw a lesson from what happened to me, I would say life throws all kinds of challenges at you. You have to take it as it comes, try out as many things as possible, and who knows, you might even become a meme.
Okay, Harold, but I'm not sure you might become a meme is quite as aspirational as you think, though, to be fair, putting on a brave smile despite inner regret is kind of this guy's whole thing. He brings that hide-the-pain energy to all his stock photos, whether he's answering the phone, whisking eggs, painting a wall, reading a patient's x-ray, or riding an exercise bike. Even when he is Santa and his face is covered by a hat and a beard, Harold's eyes still manage to hide the pain. Look at that and tell me that Santa didn't just accidentally run over an elf and hastily hide the body. Now, the reason I want to talk about Hungary is it's set for elections on April 12th. Voters there will choose a new National Assembly, their parliament, which in turn will mean either a new Prime Minister or the re-election of their current one, Viktor Orbán. He's been in office since 2010 with an absolute majority in Hungary's government for the entire 16 years of his tenure. He's actually the longest-serving current head of government in the EU. And if you want a quick taste of what kind of leader Orbán's been, take this testimonial video that he posted, featuring a real who's who of people I've called arseholes on this show, including Netanyahu, Marine Le Pen, Javier Milei, and a fourth person that I'll let you discover for yourself.
Security cannot be taken for granted. It must be won, and I think Viktor Orbán has all those qualities. He has the tenacity, the courage, the wisdom to protect his country.
It is thanks to leaders like Viktor that the camp of patriots, defenders of nations, and sovereign people is winning in Europe.
I fervently support Prime Minister Orbán and the Fidesz party.
And I want to congratulate him and also to encourage all Hungarians to continue to move forward to protect your great culture and your amazing country.
Yeah, it's none other than Academy Award-watching actor Rob Schneider. And that is a pretty weird cameo there. It's like if the Avengers movie starred 3 Avengers and also Rob Schneider. But it's not just those celebrities and also Rob Schneider. Orbán has a close relationship with many Conservatives in this country. He's not only been invited to speak at CPAC, CPAC itself has been holding a satellite conference in Hungary for the past few years, where numerous US Conservatives have shown up arguing that America really should be taking a lesson from Orbán's work.
There are many Conservative members of Congress who, like me, want to see Hungary as a beacon in the West.
Hungary's immigration policy should serve as a model to the United States.
One place where Hungary clearly has led Europe is in reasserting its national identity, specifically with regard to rejecting mass migration.
Little did I know I would walk into Budapest and basically see all of the policies that we dream for in Arizona.
OK, well, first, based on that blouse, I don't think Carrie Lake came from Arizona as much as from 1987. But also, if you love Budapest so much, please know that you can and should go live there. The point is, Republicans love Viktor Orbán. He's even been officially endorsed in this upcoming election by Trump, who once praised him like this.
You know, I was very honored as a man. Viktor Orbán, anyone ever hear of him? He's probably like one of the strongest leaders anywhere in the world, and he's the leader of, right? He's the leader of Turkey.
No, he isn't. Close though. You are thinking of the right planets, though. In Trump's defence, Hungary and Turkey are both in the same region, both ruled by an authoritarian, and both words that a caveman would say while ordering a sandwich, so you can see why his brain went there. And the love fest between Orbán and American Conservatives is a two-way street. In fact, just last Saturday, he spoke at the latest CPAC Hungary and outlined exactly how he sees himself fitting in to a global conservative movement.
Since President Trump's win, the Western world has become a better place. Gender propaganda and woke ideology have been pushed back. People can proudly embrace Christianity as the foundation and sustaining force of our civilization. What's happening now is the largest political realignment in Western civilization in 100 years. The epicenter of this change is the United States, and its European forward base is Hungary.
Wow, there is a lot there, but citing the West's largest political realignment in 100 years is pretty striking given, you know, what started happening in Europe around 100 years ago. That's right, Winnie the Pooh was first published. I don't know what you were thinking about, but you should know, things in Hungary aren't actually going great. On Orban's watch, it's become one of the poorest countries in the EU, so it's frankly no surprise that in recent years there have been plenty of protests against Orban's government, like this one.
They're chanting, freaking dirty Fidesz, who's Orban's party. What's up with the zebra? What does the zebra symbolize?
According to the rumors, Orban has an estate in the countryside where zebras were spotted.
The sign back there, that's kind of the center of this, says Hungary is a dictatorship. And then I'm being told O1G means Orban is a sperm. Orban is a sperm.
Yeah, Orban is a sperm, which I assume is an insult and does just mean that he tastes slightly better when you eat pineapple. Also, that rumour about zebras being spotted is amazing if true, as all the zebras I've ever seen have been striped. Boom! Got it! Boom, boom! I got that guy so good. This show is your only source for animal puns and jokes about drinking semen in, frankly, too rapid succession. Orban's Fidesz party has actually been trailing by double digits in most polls ahead of this election, but they may well still win anyway for reasons that we'll get into later. So, given Hungary's election is just around the corner and just how invested in Orban Conservatives here clearly are, we thought tonight it might be worth taking a look at Viktor Orbán. And let's start with a little history. And I'll skip past the stuff that we all learned in school about Hungary, like how it, say it with me, was part of the Soviet bloc for much of the 20th century, where it operated under a communist dictatorship. Exactly. We're all on the same page, thanks to America's famously thorough and globally curious education system. But when the communist bloc began to crumble, Orban was in the right place at the right time. Here he is in 1989 as a 26-year-old, calling for the withdrawal of Soviet troops and free Hungarian elections. And while I am no fan of Orban's later work, I will admit, he was a late 80s snack. He's like Mel Gibson there. He's got the hair, the intensity, and the looming sense that things will eventually take a dark turn. Now, after the fall of Soviet communism, Orban took part in talks that eventually led to Hungary's democracy. And at the time, he and Fidesz were actually a relatively liberal youth movement. In fact, early on, only people under 35 could even join the party. Just look at one of their early 90s campaign ads.
Here, and something different.
A blank slate.
A new democracy.
A new Hungary.
Vote for Fidesz.
Kirai. That ad has got everything 90s kids loved. Maps and orange, dominoes, and a bunch of guys who look like they're running for the president of a college radio station. There was Viktor Orbán, Hungarian Anthony Michael Hall, a steakhouse waiter on his smoke break, and, of course, Virgin John Mayer. Back then, Fidesz campaigned on adopting Western European economic and political standards and limiting the role of the state and the influence of religion on public life. But after Orban was elected to Parliament in 1990, he started moving the party to the right. He eventually became Europe's youngest Prime Minister in 1998, only to lose after just one term. And in his years out of power, he continued moving to the right, amping up nationalist populist rhetoric and starting to wrap himself in religion. And as he tells it now, he developed a pretty stark philosophy.
In order to win, it is not enough to know what you are fighting for. You also have to know how you should fight. My answer is play by your own rules.
Now, on the surface, play by your own rules is a pretty banal sentiment. It's the live, laugh, love for people who haven't been divorced yet. But Hungary soon found out what he meant by that in a political sense. Because in 2010, after the global financial crisis and a scandal in Hungary's ruling party, Orban was swept back into power with a two-thirds supermajority and immediately began tampering with the rules to make sure he never lost again. As he put it, we have to win once, but then win big. Essentially meaning if he ever gained power, he'd use it to fortify his position indefinitely. And we only have to win once is one of the more ominous things to hear from a leader. It's right up there along with, trust me, you're gonna love the Kool-Aid. Open the gates, Papa, gotta get a closer look at that big old horse. And no smoking, what is this, a blimp for dorks? Pass me my lighter. Sure enough, once back in power, Orban moved swiftly to solidify control. In his first year in office, his government rushed through hundreds of new laws and ushered through a brand new constitution that was drafted behind closed doors and debated in Parliament for only 9 days. There were also big changes to Hungary's election system, including gerrymandering maps to stack the odds heavily in Orban's favour. As a result, in 2014, his party won 45% of the vote, but 91% of the districts. In fact, thanks to that and other tweaks, independent observers have deemed Hungarian elections since then free but not fair, which is an interesting combination. You are free to vote for anyone you want, whether it's Orban or whoever inevitably loses to him. And while changes like those could theoretically have faced legal challenges, Orban's also co-opted Hungary's court system, packing it with loyalists and passing a constitutional amendment that removed the court's power to evaluate any new constitutional amendments. And when you take all of that together, as this scholar points out, it was basically a coup, but a very 21st century one.
We tend to think of a coup, right, as happening with tanks in the streets, you know, and the military takeover and the announcement on radio that, you know, all civil liberties have died. That's not what autocracy looks like anymore. You don't get phalanxes of tanks. You get phalanxes of lawyers.
That is chilling, because if there is one thing that is scarier than a tank, it is a lawyer. Believe me. We have a bunch of them for this show, and they are constantly yelling things like, John, you can't do this, or John, you can't show that, or John, you can't say with no evidence that Millie Bobby Brown helped plan the 9/11 attacks. That's defamation, and we will get sued. So reluctantly, I don't say it. Though I will say she hasn't denied it. We admittedly haven't asked, but her silence says something. But it's not just Orban's control of government. Part of the way he's won over the Hungarian public is through his control of the media. After returning to power, his government created a new agency to impose heavy fines for coverage that it considered unbalanced or offensive, as well as founding a new state media organisation called MTVA, overseeing all public media across TV, radio and the internet. Listen to one anonymous employee there explain just how much editorial control Orban has.
Every single thing connected to domestic politics is restricted. I mean, you can't write anything bad about the government. For example, if something is politically sensitive, I get instructions. In some cases, I have the whole ready-made article, so I don't need to do anything, no editing, just Control-C, copy and paste the whole article, really. It's unimaginable, to be honest.
Yeah, those conditions clearly aren't ideal for a news outlet. There is a reason they typically don't give out the Pulitzer for excellence in Control-V. A study of one public TV nightly news show found that over 6 months there wasn't a single instance of governing party politicians appearing on screen in a negative light. Literally 0 seconds of negative coverage, which just should not be possible. Politicians attract negative coverage about everything they do, whether it's about their offensive fashion faux pas or their court-ordered liability for sexual abuse, to pick 2 equivalent examples. And Orban's reach goes well beyond state media, as his allies bought up tons of private independent outlets and then centralised many of them under a single foundation.
According to the investigative journalism outlet Adlatso, since 2010, allies of the Prime Minister have been buying up numerous Hungarian media outlets. Men like former Hollywood producer Andy Viner and old-school friend Lawrence Meserosh are among a group of 14 Orban allies who've collectively bought 11 radio stations, 20 television channels, and close to 500 online and print organisations.
Wow, a far-right leader's friends and allies just buying up all the media outlets in the country and turning them into conservative sycophants. Can you imagine that? I sure can't. That's definitely not something I've had recurring nightmares about for the past month. And the result of all this has been Orban's party currently controls roughly 80% of the media market. And this level of influence over laws, courts, elections and the media has allowed Orban to reshape Hungary virtually unchecked. On the international level, that's meant being a constant thorn in the EU side, especially when it comes to dealing with Russia. Orban's consistently had the friendliest ties to the Kremlin in the European Union. In fact, he's long weaponised Hungary's veto power at the EU to block Russia-related sanctions, tie up financial aid to Ukraine, and repeatedly stall urgent EU decisions. And it says something that even a decade ago, this is how the then President of the European Commission greeted Orban at a summit.
The dictator is coming. Dictator?
It's pretty good. It's pretty good. And while I do not condone violence, there are a few scenarios where I think it's fine to slap someone. When you're trying to revive them, when you are Cher and you really need Nick Cage to snap out of it, and of course, whenever you have the chance to hit an authoritarian in the face. Meanwhile, domestically, Orban's reshaped Hungary into what's basically a theme park of reactionary talking points. For instance, he's railed against Europe becoming a mixed-race society and opposes allowing asylum seekers into Hungary despite EU and international laws. During the migrant and refugee crisis a decade ago, Hungary was accused of unlawful detention and violence against asylum seekers. And he made a big show back then of being openly hostile toward them, even going so far as to build an electrified border fence, which inevitably got this rave review from Tucker Carlson.
Hungary began building the fence in June of 2015. By September, it was done.
Well, they're serious about their border. No, it's not a high-tech border wall. It's a double fence with a road in the middle. But the difference is they're willing to protect it. They're not kidding. It's their border. They control it because they're a country. It's also really pretty.
Pretty? Look, there are three things you can rely on in this life: death, taxes, and if you build a fence to keep out immigrants, Tucker Carlson is gonna want to fuck it. Although, if he really does want to kiss some electrified barbed wire, who am I to stop him? Love is love. But even as migration to Europe has declined, Orban has continued to fearmonger about how, if it weren't for him, Hungary might be forced to accept millions of refugees, who he has falsely characterised as disease-ridden threats to public health, extremists planning terrorist acts, and agents of a plot to replace native Europeans with foreigners, all while reaching for a now familiar scapegoat, suggesting George Soros was masterminding a nefarious plan to overrun Hungary with refugees and posting billboards and full-page media ads with the caption, "Don't let Soros have the last laugh." And it wasn't just billboards. Orban's government also passed a law officially called Stop Soros that made it illegal to help asylum seekers, even just with their paperwork, and led a campaign to shut down the Hungarian university that Soros founded. Though what is a little strange about Orban's anti-Soros vendetta is that back in 1989, he actually received a Soros-funded scholarship to study at Oxford University, where I presume he majored in irony. But immigrants and Soros aren't Orban's only punching bags. His government's also gone after Hungary's LGBTQ community, something that he bragged about at CPAC.
To sum up, the mother is a woman, the father is a man, and leave our kids alone. Full stop, end of discussion. We decided we don't need more genders, we need more rangers. Less drag queens and more Chuck Norris.
What? That doesn't make any sense. The number of genders has nothing to do with the number of rangers, and the number of drag queens has nothing to do with the number of Chuck Norrises, especially because the most Chuck Norrises you can have is one, and that number went down to 0 last week. And if this is how you are finding that out, surprise! But it's not just rhetoric. Orban's government officially redefined family, which meant an effective ban on adoption by same-sex couples, and banned trans people from changing their gender on their IDs. In 2021, Hungary even passed a law banning depicting or promoting LGBT+ content in schools and the media. And if that sounds at all familiar to you, it may be because just 9 months after that, Florida's Ron DeSantis signed his version of it, focused on classroom instruction, the so-called Don't Say Gay law. But perhaps the policy that sums up Orban's obsessions the best, from Christian conservatism to panic over migrants, is his relentless focus on Hungary's low birth rate. He's tried to increase it by introducing incentives like tax exemptions and interest-free loans of about $30,000 for parents, which then get cancelled if they have 3 children. And that's a pretty good deal, but does make giving kids the talk a little more complicated. Well, when a man and a woman love each other very much, but also get a sick, low-interest loan from the Hungarian government, that's how babies are made. Orban's framed the need for Hungarians to procreate as an existential crisis, because to hear him tell it in this ad that his government posted, the alternative is for the country to be overrun by migrants.
Azon egyszerű népi bölcsesség miatt, hogy halból lehet halászlevet csinálni, de halászléből halat nem. És ha egyszer beengedted a migránsokat, és azokat összekeverednek veled, és több gyerekük születik, mint a benszülötteknek, csak időkérdés, matematikai kérdés, és ellakják tőled az országodat.
OK, obviously that's yet more great replacement fear-mongering, but as for you can make fish soup from fish, but you can't make fish from fish soup, is that folk wisdom, or is that just how soup works? I'm just saying, if your nana pointed at a bowl of soup and said, you can't make fish out of that, you'd be looking at retirement home brochures that afternoon. Also, for what it's worth, that metaphor cuts both ways, because I've found, with fish soup as with countries, when you add more ingredients, it tends to taste better. Otherwise, what you have is hot fish water. But Orban is serious about this. He spent about 5% of Hungary's GDP on programmes incentivising families to have kids, but it hasn't worked. Hungary's fertility rate recently dipped to the lowest in a decade, and their population is still shrinking. And that might be because people just don't feel optimistic about raising kids in Orban's Hungary, a place where 2/3 of the citizens describe the national education system as bad, or where even the Conservative Heritage Foundation has put his government at the bottom of the EU in its rankings of government integrity. And that is the thing about Viktor Orbán. For all the fear-mongering he's done, all the fences he's built, and all the laws he's passed to protect Hungary from the threat of migrants, gays and George Soros, he's fundamentally failed when it comes to the basics of good governance. Funding for school and hospitals there has gotten so dire, he had to sign an executive order to ensure medical facilities were stocked with toilet paper. Although, to hear his health secretary tell it, any complaints that people had about that were completely unreasonable.
In an operation as big as the Hungarian hospital system, which is 3 million square meters and has tens of thousands of people visiting every day, I consider it a mathematical impossibility that there should be toilet paper in all hospital bathrooms at all times. To this day, I maintain that this is a mathematical impossibility.
Look, I've heard some bad talking points in the past, but it's mathematically impossible for our hospitals to have toilet paper is right up there. I'm really only surprised that he didn't go on to suggest hospitals just hang a sign in every bathroom reminding people that using their socks is always an option. And it is not a great sign for Orban that some of his heaviest-handed tactics now do seem to be backfiring. Take this story from last summer.
Viktor Orbán's government banned LGBTQ public gatherings in March, including this one. But that ban only seems to have galvanized countless Hungarians. They took part in the parade despite the risk of being identified by the authorities using facial recognition software.
I object to any restriction of rights. Everyone should be free to choose a partner. And I condemn any restrictions that crush freedom of assembly and other freedoms. And that's why I'm here.
I thought the government would make it impossible for this to happen and that there wouldn't be many people. It's a fantastic feeling that it's a much bigger crowd than ever before.
Yeah, that is amazing, and a pretty colossal backfire from Orban. After all, if the Rob Schneider movie The Chosen One taught us anything, it's the harder you try to oppress people through fear, the more they'll rise up against you. Now, full disclosure, I don't know if that's really the moral of that film. Like everyone else on Earth, I haven't seen it, but what are you going to do? Watch it yourself to fact-check me? No fucking way! So, let's just say that's the message of the film and move on, shall we? So, what happens next? Well, despite the increasing opposition to Orban in Hungary, the truth is, in this election, the playing field is still tilted strongly in his favour. And even if he somehow ends up losing the game that he's carefully rigged, it's worth knowing his main opponent, Peter Magyar, isn't exactly the reformer that you would dream of here. He's a former member of Fidesz who's railed against Orban's corruption, but still shares plenty of his right-leaning views. And even some Hungarians who say they plan to vote for him don't seem thrilled about it.
I think more and more people want change.
Mr. Magyar, he used to be a member of Fidesz.
Yeah.
Do you worry that he might be too similar?
4 years later, we will see. To be honest, if there would be a good left-wing party, I would vote for them, but there is not. So I will vote for Magyar Péter.
So he's not completely on your level when it comes to everything?
It's not my taste, exactly.
Yeah, he's clearly not thrilled about voting for Magyar, but he's willing to push that discomfort down and put on a happy face anyway. If only there were a Hungarian meme to capture that sentiment perfectly. I guess we'll never know. But the thing is, regardless of what happens on April 12th, Orban's stranglehold on power should be alarming for us here in the States, because he has clearly been an inspiration to American conservatives, to the point that J.D. Vance is apparently planning to visit Hungary to show support for Orban ahead of their election. And that is because for them, Orban is not a cautionary tale, he is a blueprint. To put it another way, if Orban is a sperm, think of Trump as the baby, the sperm. In fact, you know what? Forget that. It's a disgusting image. Let's reset and try again. Look, it's not just me sounding the alarm here. People like this Hungarian politician have been trying to warn us for a while.
You must be familiar with the fact that there are many U.S. conservatives coming here to learn from Orban's style of governance. Why do you think that is?
I don't know why that is, but I know that it's dangerous. You should take care of your democracy because, fortunately enough, you have your checks and balances. If somebody is able to switch them off, you would also slide down. This is what happened to Hungary, and I really hope that your system, the 200-year-old American democracy, which I admire, is strong enough to withstand any such threats.
Yeah, he's right. The fact is, we are lucky to have the checks and balances that we do, but we would do well to watch for warning signs of what happened in Hungary starting to happen here. You know, small things like, I don't know, stacking the courts, or shameless gerrymandering, or fear-mongering about immigrants, or presidential allies buying up the media. You know, anything that you might spot like that. And look, it is not a perfect one-to-one. Orban's takeover was organised and methodical, while Trump has the attention span of a coked-up hummingbird with a head injury. But they're not worlds apart either. And I'll say, if the right is looking to Orban as a model, the rest of us could do a lot worse than to look to those Hungarians in the streets for inspiration. Because everyone who's ever fought for American democracy, failing to resist authoritarianism would be a huge slap in the face. And unfortunately, not the undeniably fun kind.